year's 2246, we are approaching the Red Planet. The Red Planet is not Mars, though. The Red Planet is Earth. In the year 2123, humans pushed science to the absolute limit, but they pushed too far, and unleashed a scientific horror beyond comprehension. It was a combination of virus and super fast-growing organism, and within seconds, it ate up the entire lab. It didn't really eat anything, but it fused their DNA together, and any living organism it touched was incorporated into a giant super creature. It spread very fast. The military could not stop it. It turns out God couldn't stop it either. For people on Earth, it was hopeless. In less than a week, all life on Earth was fused into a giant superorganism. It covered most of the planet. A lucky few hid in bunkers, where they eventually starved to death. The superorganism was 7 miles tall at its thickest. It covered 97% of the planet's surface. In this giant superorganism, hundreds of trillions of sentient souls are in perpetual agony. Hundreds of quintillions of other non-sentient creatures are also included. But fortunately, they don't feel pain the way we do. Pain is the curse of consciousness. Billions of souls are brought into the world each day due to the organism's super-enhanced reproduction. Billions of souls also die each day. They are the lucky ones. The organism feeds on itself because there is no other food source. So it slowly digests living things and grows creatures out of itself that eat other creatures. There are no 100% humans in this organism. All human DNA has been merged with the DNA from other animals. The very bottom of the organism is the worst. Human heads by the countless millions, slowly drown in waste byproducts. They used to die instantly, but they evolved gills, so now they suffer longer. There are unspeakable horrors on the surface as well. Some tops have evolved pores, where people are thrown into a stew. Tentacles come and eat the stew. Those who don't melt are taken away by floating things that are best left unknown. Pores as big as mountains seed the skies with flying creatures and diseases. Some have giant faces. In what is left of Paris, an old man fights off the organism with a cane. He is on top of the Eiffel Tower. He lived over a century because he evolved nostrils that feed on the disease that fills the air. The cane has a pheromone that keeps the organism away. A giant fish the size of Texas grew over what was once Yellowstone National Park. It is in pain, and every 5 hours it barfs a hot geyser of blood and other bodily fluids thousands of miles into the air, where it escapes into space. A terrestrial blood flare. This was indeed a biological hell, brought on by a bio-apocalypse. Welcome to Hell on Earth. Fortunately, humans had already colonized the moon and parts of Mars. They were spared. Hundreds of millions of people lived in vast cities, built inside the moon's craters, that were covered in huge domes. The cities and tunnels on the front side of the moon make up a country called Luna. Luna is ruled by scientists, and science is the main religion. On the dark side of the moon, there was a vast system of caves. The cave system was a nation called New Jerusalem. All the religions that used to be on Earth merged into one super crazy religion. Most scientists believe that no God would allow hundreds of trillions of innocent souls to suffer in perpetual agony. Therefore, they concluded that God did not exist. A handful of scientists did believe in God. They just thought he was a real son of a bitch. The religious people believed that the bio-apocalypse was God's punishment for worshiping science and meddling with his creation. They believed science was evil and should be rejected. They were hypocrites, though, because they relied on oxygen machines to keep them from suffocating to death. This never occurred to them. The scientists were hypocrites, too. Almost all of them, when they were asleep, would find themselves praying to God, thanking him for sparing them the fate suffered by 99.9% of humanity. They usually did this in their dreams, and usually forgot the next morning. As the years passed by, the scientists eventually came to the conclusion that they should do something about the giant organism. They all got together so they could discuss how to get rid of it, and eventually repopulate the Earth. At first they tried launching several massive nukes, but the organism just regenerated in days, and the radiation made things even crazier. At least a few 100 billion people and animals were put out of their misery. The scientists decided that they should create a supervirus that would spread very fast and turn dead cells into a light, filthy gas that would rise to the top of the atmosphere. The filthy gas could be sucked out and then launched into the sun. Then they would fill the earth with oxygen, nitrogen, and other materials that would make normal life possible again. The religious people were opposed to the plan. They considered life sacred, so they opposed abortion, assisted suicide, and putting most of humanity out of its misery. So they made a plan to thwart the scientists and stop the virus from being shot at the earth. The scientists had to create the virus first. To avoid the same mistake made a century ago, this virus was designed in a sealed lab, surrounded by 6 layers of ultra-high-tech security clearance. When the virus was complete, the religious people tried to storm the lab. They only made it to security level 2 before being overwhelmed, so they blew themselves up. Outside, automated guns and manned guns finished off the last of the religious invader force that had stormed the lab. Blood spurts differently in moon gravity. The religious people had a history of attacking and terrorizing scientists, so this was nothing new. However, their current actions had threatened all life on the moon, as well as the future of Earth. The scientists were especially on alert now. As they transported the virus to the virus launcher, they made sure they were escorted by the scientist military force. The virus was transported into a heavily armored truck that was programmed to detonate a nuke if the virus ever broke out of its diamond storage capsule. The armored truck was attacked. The religious people tried to ambush them. A major battle ensued. The scientists won, even though they were outnumbered. The survivors on the religious side were either executed or put out of their misery. They were a risk. The scientists had tolerated the religious people before, but this was the last straw. The scientists turned off the oxygen machines that kept New Jerusalem alive and gave them a message. Either you give up your stupid religion and embrace science, or you suffocate to death. Some religious people chose science, but they were considered heretics and were executed. The virus truck survived the battle and delivered the virus to the virus launcher with no problems. The virus launcher embedded a diamond capsule in a metal bullet and discharged it towards the Earth at 50 million miles per hour. The metal bullet penetrated over a mile into the organism's vile flesh. The effects were instant. The virus spread with the same speed and cruelty that the organism did a century ago. For so many hundreds of trillions of people and smart animals, this was the end they were all hoping for. The process of death under the virus was extremely painful and horrifying, but it was quick. For the first time in a century, people and half-people on Earth smiled out of their own free will, even as they melted and vomited. Hallelujah! The scientists watched their virus eat away at the organism from the safety of their moon balcony. They didn't dare celebrate, but they held hands and watched in awe. Most of the organism had been killed off. However, the scientists didn't know that there was much more to the organism than the surface. Several hundred miles below what used to be the giant blood-barfing face, the organism had been incubating a giant fetus. The fetus itself was 50 miles tall, and it grew in a womb almost 150 miles across. The massive tentacle tunnels that connected the fetus to the organism's surface had severed themselves, so the fetus wasn't infected. The fetus sensed the parent organism's death, so the 12 umbilical cords snapped, and the fetus became conscious early. The giant fetus wasn't the only subterranean monstrosity being gestated by the organism. A colony of giant worm things, each 10 miles high, was also growing underneath what was once Australia. The giant fetus crawled out of the earth and caused a 9.0 earthquake. The wormoids also emerged. The scientists didn't see this coming, and they were terrified. They panicked and launched nuclear missiles at the fetus, but they were not accurate because the fetus was too fast. The nuclear missiles only burned the fetus' skins and made him very angry. In revenge, the fetus picked up a small mountain and threw it at the moon. Many of the moon's domed cities were vaporized, and others had their domes crack or break. Tens of millions of people died. In a desperate attempt to save what was left, the scientist space navy was sent to destroy the fetus and the wormoids. The space navy decided to take care of the wormoids first. They realized that the wormoids gave birth to the floating things so terrifying that if you saw them, you would die of fright. Many scientists in the Space Navy died of fright because of the floating things, but the other scientists learned to put up visors so they only picked up heat signals. Then they shot missiles at the floating things and blew them to pieces. The wormoids started screaming and shooting spikes out of their mouths. The wormoids were more dangerous than the scientists thought. The nukes took care of those bastards. The Navy then flew to the giant fetus. They were armed with many different nuclear weapons. One ship had a gun called the Thunderchild 3000. It was a rapid-fire nuclear missile launcher. They caused the fetus a lot of pain and made it stumble, but they didn't kill it. The scientists wondered why the nukes didn't destroy the fetus. They panicked when the fetus ran towards them. The fetus was too big to see the ships, so it decided to squirt blood everywhere. Most of the ships were destroyed by the waves of the fetus's blood. Fortunately, the ship with the Thunderchild 3000 survived. It opened fire. The fetus swiped at the ship, but it was designed to be extremely fast, so the fetus missed. The ship opened fire on the fetus's back. The thousands of nuclear warheads being fired cut through miles of the fetus's flesh. Until they burst through the other side. The fetus screamed in pain and drooled blood and turned around to swipe at the ship. The ship opened fire on the fetus's finger until it fell off. The ship flew around to the back of the fetus's head, intending to make the killing blow. The ship opened fire right at the biggest intersection of blood veins. The nuclear explosions penetrated the fetus's prime blood vessel, sending a tidal spurt of the fetus's blood directly at the ship. The stream of blood forced the stream of incoming nukes to detonate and hit the ship itself, causing the ship to detonate in a supermassive nuclear explosion. The massive explosion sent blood everywhere. The giant fetus looked like it was bathed in an aura of divine blood and holy cosmic light. The fetus walked over to Mount Everest and picked it up. The fetus threw Mount Everest at the moon. Human life on the moon was surely doomed. Or was it? Remember those religious nuts who had their oxygen machines cut off? Some of them were still alive, surviving on what oxygen remained. The relative lack of oxygen made them delusional and out of touch, but it also brought them closer to God than ever before. And even though they were dying, they continued to pray for salvation. And God delivered. God sent forth the angel of death, a winged being 40 miles tall. The angel of death would solve things once and for all. The angel of death's sword sent forth a blast of holy energy at Mount Everest, shattering it into billions of pieces. The angel of death flew to the earth to finish off the fetus once and for all. The angel of death landed in front of the fetus and caused an earthquake. The fetus tried to attack, but the angel of death cut the fetus in half, killing it. This act would be later known as the Immaculate Abortion. As the dead fetus fell apart and unleashed hundreds of cubic miles of blood, blood gushed over the entire planet and filled the empty oceans. The angel of death plunged its sword into where Mount Everest used to be. A miracle emerged from the point of impact. On the ever-changing sword emerged 2 commandments. As humans began repopulating the earth, a new religion was born, and the sword became the holiest sight on the planet. The sword itself, and the recorded events that preceded it, offered definitive proof that a higher being existed. With this new religion that emphasized restraint and reconciled God with science, mankind eventually conquered the galaxy.